My parents always placed all their love and attention on my brother, the one they believed to be perfect. They completely cut ties with me when I decided to pursue my own business, a choice they thought was reckless. But now that I've made it, they expect me to hire my brother. It's a strange turn of events after years of being cast aside. I'm 33 years old, and from the moment I was excluded from their life, I worked relentlessly to build something of my own. It all began when I graduated from college in my early 20s, filled with ambition and a hunger for success. I had always been the kind of person who pushed myself to achieve more. I wanted to make something meaningful out of my life. But, as anyone with a family like mine can understand, ambition was a trait they saw as a problem unless it fit their narrow expectations. My older brother, Jason, had always been their golden boy. He never had to put in the same effort as others to get what he wanted. Good grades, a natural charm, and the right crowd of friends. He was their pride and joy. Whatever he did, they couldn't stop praising him, making me feel like I was invisible in comparison. While they showered him with praise, they kept pushing me towards mediocrity, hoping I would conform to the life they had planned for me. They never understood my desire to build something of my own. And when I started my business, they didn't just disagree. They cut me off completely. I was on my own. It was hard at first, especially knowing that they couldn't see my vision. But I pushed through. I poured every ounce of energy I had into making my dream a reality. Now that I've succeeded, things have changed. My brother lost his job, and suddenly, I'm the one they turn to for help. They want me to hire Jason, the same person who always had everything handed to him. It's a bitter reminder of how they treated me when I needed them most. Despite everything, I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not sure I can simply give in to their demands now. I'm not going to lie. It hurt a lot. I tried everything I could to make them proud of me, but it felt like nothing I did was ever enough. Every accomplishment, every small victory, seemed insignificant compared to Jason's effortless achievements. When I graduated from college with honors, they quickly turned their attention to Jason's high school accolades, brushing aside my own accomplishments. When I landed my first job, they showered him with praise about his potential, while I was left to silently work and earn my paycheck. But it wasn't just the praise that stung. It was the endless comparisons. Every holiday, every family reunion, Jason's successes were highlighted over and over. It became unbearable. And then there was the way they let him get away with everything. He was living this life of luxury, constantly borrowing money from our parents without them ever batting an eye. Meanwhile, I was busting my ass, trying to make something of myself. But I couldn't let it go. I had this burning idea for a business, a tech startup that I was certain would succeed. I wanted to prove to everyone, especially my family, that I could make it on my own terms. I started working on my idea in the evenings after my regular job, pouring all my energy and savings into it. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to try. Yet, every time I talked to my parents about it, they brushed it off, offering only faint encouragement at best. It felt like nothing I did could ever gain their full attention. They were too caught up in Jason's world, and I was left on the sidelines. Then one day, I reached a breaking point. It was another family dinner, and once again, Jason was the center of attention. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I snapped, expressing everything I had been holding back. I told them how I had been feeling, how their favoritism had hurt me, and how exhausted I was from constantly being compared to someone who didn't even try. The silence in the room was deafening. I understood it was a risky decision, but it was my dream. I wanted to create something of my own, free from relying on my family's approval. When I broke the news to my parents that I was leaving my job to launch my business, their response was nothing like I had hoped. Instead of encouragement, I was met with harsh disapproval. They called me reckless, saying I was tossing away a secure future for an unrealistic fantasy. My mother was in tears, and my father scolded me, insisting I could never succeed without his support. But the worst part wasn't just the scolding. They told me I had let them down, accusing me of making a terrible decision. They said I was betraying the family by not following in Jason's path. And Jason, he couldn't care less. He always took the easy way out, and he'd be the first to point out how fortunate I was to have such a stable job, mocking the idea that I could succeed on my own. Still, I felt determined. Despite their harsh words, I knew I couldn't follow the life they had planned for me. My vision for my future wasn't tied to their expectations. The fear of failure didn't scare me as much as the thought of never trying. I didn't want to look back and regret not taking the leap, even if it meant facing hardship along the way. Months went by, and my new business began to take shape. The struggles were real, and sometimes I doubted my decision. The loneliness of working late into the night, the uncertainty of each step I took, these were challenges I hadn't expected. But gradually, I started seeing the results of my hard work. My small company grew, and I started to build a community around it. One that supported my vision and appreciated my efforts. Looking back, I realized that the path to success wasn't always about having a clear and certain future. It was about taking risks, making mistakes, and learning from them. I had learned that sometimes the hardest part wasn't the failure. It was the courage to move forward, despite everything, on my own terms. I had no choice but to make a tough decision. I cut off my family and invested every penny I had saved into my business. The road was incredibly hard, exhausting, and relentless. There were moments when I questioned whether I would survive this. But I didn't give up. Day after day, I worked tirelessly, pouring everything into my dream. Slowly, things started to improve. I signed a few key clients, and the business began to grow. Before long, the success I had been working so hard for started to show, and I was finally able to focus on my venture full-time. Just as my business started to thrive, my brother's life started to unravel. Jason, who had always been handed opportunities without much effort, suddenly found himself without a job. The company he worked for downsized, and despite his vast network and promises, they let him go. Jason couldn't handle it. Word spread that he was spiraling into a deep depression, drinking heavily, and blaming everyone except himself for his downfall. I couldn't ignore the guilt. I knew I had made the right decision for myself. But seeing my brother's pain was difficult. It was hard to reconcile my success with his struggles. He was once the golden child, always getting by without trying, while I had to fight for every inch of my progress. Now, the roles seemed reversed. Despite everything, I tried to keep my distance. I needed to stay focused on my business, on the life I was building. But the guilt lingered. I wondered if I should have done more for him, offered help or advice. Yet, every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered how hard I had fought to get here and how much I had sacrificed. Ultimately, I knew I couldn't jeopardize my future for someone else's mistakes. A few months later, I received an unexpected call. It was from my parents, asking if we could talk. As I held the phone, a wave of emotions flooded over me. It had been years since I'd heard from them, and now, out of nowhere, they were reaching out. These were the same people who had dismissed my ambitions, criticized my dreams, and told me I would never succeed. Now, they were calling, I felt a mix of disbelief and skepticism. But curiosity ultimately won, and I answered the call. "Hello?" I spoke, trying to sound calm, though I felt anything but. The voice on the other end was my father's. "Son," he said, his voice laced with both regret and hope. "We've been thinking a lot about you and everything that's happened, about your business. We realize now that we were wrong to turn away from you. We see how hard you've worked, and we want to make things right." I nearly dropped the phone. Was this some cruel joke? This was the same man who had once told me I was throwing my life away by pursuing my business. As my father's words sunk in, my mind raced. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For so long, they had belittled everything I worked for, and now they wanted to make amends. The shock was overwhelming, and a bitter part of me felt like they were only reaching out because they saw how much I had succeeded. It felt hollow, but the other part of me couldn't ignore the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they were genuine this time. I paused for a moment before responding. "I don't know if I can just forget everything," I said slowly, my voice trembling. "You've hurt me, and I've had to fight every step of the way without your support." The silence on the other end stretched, and I could almost feel the weight of their regret. But even with that, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let them back into my life after all these years. And now, out of the blue, he was speaking in a totally different way. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or just hang up the phone. But before I had a chance to respond, he kept talking. "We've seen your growth. Your business is doing really well, and we're proud of you." His tone then shifted. "But there's something we need to discuss." A knot formed in my stomach. I already had a feeling about what was coming. I could sense it. "It's about Jason," my dad said, his voice dropping. "He lost his job and he's struggling. We were hoping with all the success you've had, maybe you could help him. Maybe even give him a job." I was frozen. His words hung there for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't speak at first. The nerve, the sheer audacity. These were the same people who had turned their backs on me, who hadn't cared when I was going through hard times. They'd always supported Jason, no matter what he did. And now, after everything, they expected me to help him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was as if nothing had ever happened between us. They had cut me out of their lives for following my own path. And now they wanted me to open up the doors of my success to Jason? Let him walk right in like it was nothing? The hypocrisy of it all left me speechless. It took everything I had not to explode. I had worked hard to get to where I was, and now, after all the years of being dismissed, they were acting like none of that mattered. It was as if my struggles didn't exist anymore. Just the thought of them asking for my help made my blood boil. I wanted to shout. I felt the urge to throw everything at them, to remind them of how they had treated me. But I held back. Instead, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. "I don't think you understand," I began, keeping my tone steady. "I've worked tirelessly to reach where I am now. No one handed me anything. No one came to my aid when I was struggling. And now, after all this time, you expect me to help someone who never had to lift a finger, someone who always got the easy way out, the one who never had to fight for anything like I did." There was a long pause. I could hear my father's shallow breaths, unsure of how to respond. "Listen," I continued, my voice tightening with frustration. "I didn't get to where I am by relying on others. I built everything from scratch. And as much as you think it's a simple solution to just throw Jason into the mix, it's not that easy. Success is not about connections or titles. It's about hard work, persistence, and sacrifice. It's about understanding the value of hard work, of maintaining your principles even when it's difficult. Right now, Jason doesn't have that sense of responsibility. My father let out a deep sigh. We didn't want to disappoint you, son. We know we made mistakes, and we regret that. But we're unsure what else we can do. Jason is lost, and we don't want him to sink deeper. I responded with certainty. I'm not the one who walked away from him. He's the one who took everything for granted, living a privileged life without effort. Now, he's facing the consequences. Don't expect me to rush in and rescue him from the mess he created. It felt liberating to finally express what had been weighing on me for so long. But as I ended the call, I knew it wasn't the last time my parents would reach out. They were already starting to find ways to reinsert themselves into my life, thinking that somehow my success would fix everything. I could feel their expectations hanging in the air, heavy with the hope that the wealth I had now would somehow make up for their past mistakes. It wasn't only about the wealth. It was about the honor. It was about the years of deceit, the continuous bias, and the family that had turned away from me when I needed them most. I wasn't going to let them back into my life just because they wanted something from me. Now that I had achieved success, the power dynamics had shifted, and it felt empowering. The days that followed were a flurry of emotions. My phone never stopped buzzing with texts from my parents. They kept apologizing, telling me they had learned from their mistakes and begging for another opportunity. But no matter how many texts they sent, no matter how many tears they shed over the phone, I wasn't swayed. I spent days reflecting on it all. On my childhood, on how Jason had always been treated better, and on the years I spent constructing my business from scratch. They weren't there when I needed them. When I was at my lowest, they deserted me. When I decided to take the leap and launch my own company, everyone laughed at me. They saw it as a foolish decision, a dream that would never materialize. But now, after achieving success, they believed they could just waltz back into my life, as though nothing had ever happened. The more I dwelled on it, the angrier I became. My frustration wasn't just with them. It was with the whole system that allowed Jason to stumble upward while I had to claw my way to the top. He had always been the favored one, the one who could do no wrong. Regardless of his constant failures and mistakes, he was always excused, treated with kid gloves as if he were someone special. Now, they expected me to just let it all slide. I recall the exact moment when everything became clear. I was in my office, gazing out the window, when my phone buzzed. Another message from my father. But this time, it wasn't just an apology. Jason had reached out, asking for help. After years of doing everything wrong, he now needed my support. I couldn't understand it. The audacity to think that after all the hurt and betrayal, I would help him. I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm, wondering how he could be so naive. His mistakes had led him to this point. Yet there he was, asking for handouts as if nothing had ever changed. The truth was, Jason didn't deserve my help, not after everything. I had worked tirelessly to get where I was, and now he was trying to take advantage of my success. I realized I didn't owe him anything. The world wasn't kind to people like me, so why should I help someone who had been handed everything? It was a direct request. After all these years, they were asking for help again. The message read, "We've been thinking, and maybe we were too harsh on you. We're sorry for everything, but we really need you to help Jason. He's struggling, and we don't know who else to turn to. We know you found success, and we just want to see the family come together again. A Part of me wanted to believe them, but another part of me felt something snap. They didn't want family unity. They wanted me to fix their mistakes, to bail out Jason once again. And that was a line I couldn't cross. The years of being overlooked, the favoritism toward Jason, the constant feeling that I was never enough. They couldn't simply be undone by a message like this. I was no longer the child they could manipulate, the one who felt responsible for their failures. But despite my feelings, I knew I had to think carefully. I didn't want to act out of anger. So I decided to meet them face to face and hear them out. I set up a meeting at my office. I wanted to give them one last chance to explain themselves, to see if they truly understood the weight of their actions. For years, I had worked tirelessly to get where I was, and that success wasn't something I could just toss aside. If they had really changed, if they could truly recognize the value of hard work and accountability, perhaps there was room for them in my life again. But that was something I wasn't sure of yet. As I waited for them to arrive, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of curiosity. Could people really change? Could the past be left behind? Or was this just another attempt to take advantage of me? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. When they showed up, I immediately noticed their unease. My mother's eyes were glossy with unshed tears, and my father's gaze kept drifting away, never quite meeting mine. But what struck me more than their apparent sorrow was the familiar, suffocating pattern. They expected me to forgive, to forget, and most of all, to make my achievements serve their needs. We sat in the cold conference room, the air thick with unspoken words. After a few moments of heavy silence, my father broke it. "Son, we've made mistakes, we know that. But we need your help. Please give Jason a chance to get back on his feet." I stared at them, unblinking. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "What about everything I've sacrificed? What about the years I spent struggling, building something from nothing, while Jason lived a life of ease? You didn't believe in me then, didn't support me when I needed it. Now that I've made something of myself, you want me to fix his mess?" My mother's gaze fell to the floor, and my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My heart was a mix of frustration and disbelief. They were still asking for more. After all the years of neglect, all the times they didn't see me or value my dreams, now they came, expecting me to save the day. It wasn't the first time they'd asked for help, but it felt different this time, heavier. It wasn't just about money or business. This time, it felt like they wanted me to erase the years of resentment that had built up between us. For a long time, I didn't know how to respond. The silence in the room was almost deafening, and it felt like the weight of my past decisions, their expectations, and my own desires all collided at once. Finally, I spoke again, softer, but still resolute. "I've worked hard for everything I have, and I won't let anyone take that away from me. Not even you." The words lingered in the air as my mother wiped her eyes, and my father remained silent, unable to look me in the eye. Clearly uncomfortable, my mother and father exchanged uneasy glances. Despite their discomfort, my father remained resolute. "We just want to see things right again. You've done it. You've built something remarkable. We're proud of you. We just want our family back together." His words, though intended to comfort, only seemed to add weight to the situation. I could feel the tension rising as I struggled to process everything. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. The years of strained relationships, the burdens I had carried, the sacrifices I had made, all seemed to crash down on me in an instant. "You've apologized, but it feels empty," I finally said, my voice tight with frustration. "Your request feels less like a genuine desire to make things right and more like something you think you have to do." "I've worked hard for everything I've achieved," I continued, the anger in my voice building. "And I'm not about to throw it all away just to fix your mistakes or to appease you. Jason has had every opportunity handed to him, and he's done nothing with it. It's not my job to pick up the pieces now." My words hung in the air, heavy with resentment. There was a long pause before my mother spoke, her voice softer than before. "We understand, son. We really do. But we don't know what else we can do. We're sorry for everything." Her words were sincere, but it was clear that their stance hadn't changed. Yet, deep down, I knew that no matter how much they apologized, things would never be the same again. I wasn't going to let their past mistakes shape my future. My success was mine alone. I had worked tirelessly for it, and no one, family included, was going to take it from me. That's when I truly understood. It wasn't just about wealth or business ventures. It was about earning respect. I had come to recognize my own worth through everything I had built, and there was no way anyone could diminish that. The day after our conversation, I received one last message from my parents. It wasn't an apology anymore. This time, it was a desperate request, a plea that hit me in ways I hadn't expected. They said, "We've spent a lot of time thinking, and we can't manage without you. Jason's out of work, struggling. We're asking for your help. Please forgive us and consider giving him a job. He really needs you." I was taken aback by their words, more than I had anticipated. It wasn't just their plea for Jason that stung. It was the painful realization that my parents still didn't understand the full impact of their past actions. They hadn't come to terms with the consequences of what they had done. I was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I knew I had to protect what I had worked for. On the other, my heart was torn for my family. But the truth was clear. Respect, not just for myself, but for my boundaries, was something I couldn't compromise. After everything, after years of supporting Mark. Now they wanted me to clean up his mess. They still couldn't see me for who I truly was. Someone who had forged their own path, built their own success, without depending on anyone else. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen. A rush of frustration and resentment flooded over me once more. But this time, it felt different. I had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to let my hard-earned achievements be used as a lifeline for those who had left me behind. I picked up the phone and called my attorney, a conversation I never thought I'd need to have. I needed to make sure I was legally safeguarded if my family tried to use their influence to manipulate me into complying. I wasn't going to fall into their trap of guilt and pressure again, not after everything I had endured. That night, as I sat at my desk, I typed out the final message I would ever send to my parents. The weight of it hit me, but I knew it was necessary. I didn't know what they expected to happen, but I was about to make it very clear. The message was direct, cutting through all the pretenses. I told them I was no longer willing to be their scapegoat, no longer willing to carry the burden of their expectations and disappointments. This was the end of the road for me, and I wasn't turning back. I wasn't in the habit of saving people who had abandoned me. Mark had his opportunity. He threw it away. Now, you expect me to fix his mess. You want me to offer him a job, to make everything right again. But that's not my job. It's yours. You raised him. You gave him everything he needed. and now you want me to clean up the mess because you didn't want to face the consequences of your own choices. I'm done. It wasn't an easy choice. For years, I longed for a family who would support me, who would stand by me when things got tough. But they weren't there when I needed them the most. Now, when they needed something from me, they thought I would drop everything to help. But no, my success wasn't just handed to me. It was earned through years of hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. I wasn't about to let them take that for granted. I pressed send on the message and sat back in my chair. My palms were clammy, but there was a deep sense of calm that settled over me. I wasn't going to let myself be used anymore. I had worked too hard to get to this point, to let others manipulate me for their own comfort. I had learned to stand tall on my own. And for once, I realized it was time to stop looking back. I had spent too many years trying to please others. Now, it was time to prioritize my own peace and my own future. For several days, I received no word from my family. The silence hung heavily around me, oppressive. But strangely, I felt indifferent. The choice I had made was final, and I felt at peace with it. Then, to my surprise, an unexpected message arrived. Jason, my brother, reached out. His message was simple, but it hit me like a punch. I'm sorry. I've made a mess of things, and I know you owe me nothing, but I need help. Can we talk? The words were genuine, unguarded, and unlike anything I had expected from him. Jason admitted his faults, acknowledging that he had taken so much for granted. He expressed regret for his actions, for how he had treated me over the years. In that moment, I realized something significant. I had changed. The person I had been before was no longer the same. My family's rejection had shaped me into someone stronger, more resilient. It was clear now. I was no longer the person who would let myself be mistreated. I stood at a crossroads. The decision I faced was a difficult one that weighed heavily on my heart. Jason was my brother, after all, and there was a part of me that still cared. But I knew I wasn't obligated to fix his mistakes or carry his burdens. This was a choice I had to make on my own, one that would determine how I moved forward in life. The choice wasn't as simple as it seemed. I had to decide if I was willing to offer him a chance to redeem himself, or if it was time to sever ties completely. The question lingered in my mind. Could I forgive him? Or was it finally time to walk away for good? He had to find his own way, much like I had to. I made up my mind to meet him, but this time I would set the terms. I wouldn't forgive him just because he was family. He couldn't think that just because he had fallen to his lowest point, it would be enough to walk back into my life. Still, I understood that if he truly wanted to change, if he was willing to put in the effort, perhaps I could give him a chance. When we finally sat down, I could see the regret in his eyes. This time, I listened with a different perspective. Not as someone who had been left behind, but as someone who had gone through struggles and learned what it meant to persevere, to work hard, and most importantly, to respect oneself and others. I'm not going to bail you out, Jason, I said, my tone firm but calm. But if you're serious about turning things around, I'll consider helping. However, you need to earn it. I'm not doing this out of the same old reasons. This time, it's about you proving you can stand on your own. He nodded, the weight of his past mistakes hanging over him. But there was a spark of determination in his eyes. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face the challenge ahead. He agreed to take on the task, a resolute nod signaling his readiness. In that moment, something changed. While we couldn't undo the past, we still had the chance to shape a brighter tomorrow. And that, above all else, was what truly mattered. Jason's face softened with a combination of relief and renewed resolve. "I understand," he said. "I'll show you." I paused, studying him closely, wondering if I truly believed he was capable of change. I had offered him an opportunity to start anew, but whether he would seize it was still uncertain. As he walked away, my thoughts lingered on the progress I had made. I had built my own company from nothing. There had been struggles, moments of doubt, and countless losses along the way. But I had achieved success. Now, the responsibility rested on Jason's shoulders to figure out what truly held value. Over the following weeks, I dedicated myself to further expanding my business. The challenges I had faced with Jason reminded me that no matter how much progress you make, you cannot control the decisions of others. However, what you can control is how you react to those decisions. In the end, the journey was never just about achieving success. It was about learning to manage what you could and letting go of what you couldn't. Through everything, I had come to understand that growth wasn't just about the victories. It was about how you handled the setbacks along the way. After years of hard work and sacrifice, I finally achieved the success I'd always dreamed of. My parents, who had once ignored me during my most challenging times, began to make their presence known. They reached out, hoping to rekindle a relationship that had been severed for so long. Their apologies were genuine, but I couldn't find it in myself to forgive them easily. I had moved forward and had no desire to revisit the pain of the past. Their betrayal had left a mark, and I was determined not to reopen that chapter. Instead, I turned my attention to what truly mattered: my business, the new relationships I had built, and my growing family. I learned that moving on meant not just letting go of the past, but also making room for a future where I wasn't weighed down by old wounds. Toxicity had no place in my life anymore. I had worked too hard to let people who had once made me feel insignificant back into my world. My focus was now on the positive aspects of my life. Even though I had let go of the bitterness, I never fully abandoned Jason. He was still facing challenges, but I knew he was trying. From time to time, I checked in on him, ensuring he was staying on track. It wasn't easy for him, but his efforts gave me hope. Sometimes, all you can ask for is progress, no matter how small. His determination, even in the face of adversity, reminded me that growth takes time. Ultimately, the hardest lesson I learned wasn't achieving success. It was understanding that the true challenge was letting go of the anger and resentment that had held me back for so long. In the end, peace came from within, and it was only then that I realized the real victory was in freeing myself from the weight of the past. I had put in countless hours of effort to build my life, and now the focus was on what lay ahead. A future free from the shadows of past mistakes. My family. They would need to prove themselves first. The door to reconciliation wasn't locked, but it wasn't wide open either. They would have to earn their way back. It wasn't about what they could take from me anymore. It was about whether they could offer something meaningful in return. Now, I had everything I needed: achievement, autonomy, and the liberty to make my own decisions. This was what I had fought for, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away from me. The days had passed, each one bringing a new challenge, but I faced them with determination. The past was something I had learned from, not something that defined me. The relationships I once held dear had shifted, and I knew it was time to redefine what mattered. My parents, in particular, had been a significant part of my journey. But now I had to set boundaries. No longer would I give without receiving. No longer would I be the one who compromised. The power to choose who stayed and who left my life was mine, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Freedom, I realized, was not just about physical space, but about emotional independence. It was about creating a life on my terms, without the influence of others' expectations. My parents had their own paths to walk, and I had mine. If they wanted to be a part of my world, they would have to show up differently. I was no longer willing to bend to the will of others, not when I had finally learned to stand tall on my own. In this moment, I felt a sense of clarity I had never known before. Everything I had worked for was the result of my own hands. I had fought for the life I now enjoyed, and no one, not even the ones who had once been closest to me, could take that from me. They could wait, and if they truly cared, they would earn their place once again. I was in control now, and that gave me the peace I had longed for.